hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Good.
Can you hear me okay?
You're fine.
Awesome.
I'm a little bit shadowy, but I don't have a fancy ring light like you, so.
Oh. I recommended to another friend that does lots of Zoom calls to get a ring light. And because otherwise you look a little bit like Dracula. Anyway,
I'm okay with, but yeah.
You don't look like Dracula, don't worry. Yeah, she ordered it from eBay and it still hadn't arrived when I mine arrived in a week. It was like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, anyway. I can see we've got some guests. Hi, Claire. Hi, Liana. There's about 14 viewers and stuff. You guys are welcome to comment if you have any extra questions. A few people have submitted a heap of questions to get us started, which is kind of cool. I first have to show off my merchandise. Are you wearing yours, Liv? Did you end up?
I'm not. Unfortunately, my t-shirt. I do have a piece of merchandise here, but I'm not wearing my shirt because it's in the wash because I've been wearing it in real day, like in everyday life. So I do have.
You got the tote bag.
Yes, which I love. Which is
beautiful.
Looks
so good.
It's come up really well.
Wait.
That's sweet.
I can't really tell which way the camera is, but it looks really
good. It feels
good.
backwards, doesn't it?
I'm actually really tempted to get it in blue, that color that we shared on the thing. Yeah.
The fine eyes.
Yeah. Because I'm nervous. Cool. So, hey, Lana. So if you are watching the stream and if you have any questions for Liv and I about the podcast, you can comment and on Facebook, and we'll be able to click them and share them directly so that everyone can see your stuff, your question. But we've got a heap. I got a heap more by email and stuff today. So
no, I mean that's great. But
so sorry in advance. But yeah, we've got. Let's get right into it. So I'll bring up the first question that we have. How do you adapt the book for the audio podcast?
I assume this is the only question we're going to be answering because we're going to talk about this for the entire session because it's such a big question. Oh my goodness. The short version with many cups of tea, many late nights, probably just running adrenaline at this point, and a desperate urge to be creative in a time where we're very limited.
When we first started, I think so the reason we chose the book and not the play that we had originally based the production, like the production team, like all the cast and stuff that got together and then came along. The reason we based it on the book is because the play is in copyright and we were not anticipating to make money from the production. It was going to be hopefully a cost neutral thing. Yeah. So we're just we'll just read the book. And then it sort of didn't kind of go as anticipated because we started editing chapter 1 and 2 and then we went, this may need a little adaptation, and that turned into quite a lot of adaptation. And then there were many times where I know I was messaging Liv being like, done is better than perfect. Like we could add so much dialogue, let it go.
Yeah. And it's funny, I think, because when we started, we were very much intending to stay really, really true to Austen's narrative. Like we didn't want to deviate from that. But I think the more we explored the idea, technically before we'd started recording and all of that, before we even cast, I think it's sort of we did realize that much of the novel is narrated. Much of it is, that third person who's telling the story. When so many of these conversations could so easily be actual dialogue between characters. So I think what you're still trying to remain true to Austen's narrative, but you're just actually trying to give voice to these characters and also give the actors an opportunity to have more dialogue and to delve more deeply into those characters and into those scenes and moments where various other adaptations, either because it's a film and you've only got 2 hours to do it in, or even the BBC, there's greater opportunity when you're doing the whole book. So I think once we realized that we had that capacity, we decided to capitalize on it and get more of the actors with more lines. So yeah, I think that was a big thing in actually converting it. And I think much of my time has been spent with the script and swapping things over or Yeah.
It's because so to give the audience of some detail on this, like there's times when Austin will say, and then Denny said this to such and such, and Lizzie replied this. We would take that and go, line, Denny actually saying the thing, Lizzie actually saying the thing, which is interesting. We've just got a live question from the audience, so I'll bring that one up.
Okay.
You had from Zara. Zara, do you have anything else in the works? I would love tuning into your ongoing podcast now that you've mastered the art. Do we have anything else in the works, Liv? People keep asking this.
I know. And I certainly know that right from the start, as soon as we got this ball rolling, it almost became an avalanche. Because it became so much bigger than we ever anticipated, we did go, oh my gosh, once we've done this, we can do this. And I know we've definitely floated many, many ideas, and there's certainly that are many bubbling away in the background. Like we've definitely discussed doing more Austen. So I guess the answer is kind of like in that we would love to. We don't have the next one as such prepped and ready to go for when Pride and Prejudice finishes, but who wouldn't love to do more of this? Like, be real. Like, this has been amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, we definitely lots of conversations about lots of different texts, but for us particularly as a duo, some of our production team have made some proposals and stuff, which is wonderful to see more things and more people doing things come out of that. And what else? Like B&T is doing some other online stuff. So B&T has something in the works at the moment, which there's a live for next week, which is people from Warrandyte and people from Ballarat talking about their experiences during COVID. And then the award-winning playwright Emma Wood, who's actually part of our production for Pride and Prejudice, she plays Mrs. Hill. She is going to turn it all into a play, and then they'll perform it live over Zoom. So there's some other things in the works. So good question, Zara. We have another live question, so I'll jump to that and then we'll keep coming back to the
for sure.
Hi, Natasha. So Natasha says, hardest technical challenge. Would you ever stage P&P in the flesh once we are allowed? I'll let you talk to that one, Lou.
Well, I don't know about I think I know what your hardest technical challenge is, but I think one of the things that we have found challenging is that we're all recording this in isolation, and it's wonderful to have the opportunity to work with you as a director and to have like sessions. But when it gets down to it, you're sitting in your wardrobe at home alone trying to give these lines. And when you are in a theater or in a rehearsal space or just with other human beings in the flesh, there's so much to draw on, whether that is costume or set or even in rehearsal, there's other human beings, so you can you can sort of respond and match their tone, but your dialogue can mesh because there is that connection, because you're there in person in the moment, you're experiencing the moment with other people. Whereas this particular production, as brilliant as it's been, and a lot of learning has gone into it, which is really exciting, that you're getting something out of it at the end that you go, I know how to do this. One of the hardest technical things has been that when it gets down to it, you're by yourself recording this. So you have to give a lot of variety and shades, if you will, to your dialogues and your delivery and your lines, because you don't know what's exactly going to fit with the other people and what they're offering. So I think for me, that's been my hardest challenge. I don't know that I want to go into the technical challenges that you've had with Adobe Audition and the late nights that have resulted from that. Would we ever stage it? Oh my God, we did in 2018, and boy howdy would I do it again, because it's a dream role, it's a dream production. My God, what a cast we were fortunate enough to have then and now. Like, my God, yes. Absolutely. But would people sit there for the entirety of the book? Probably not. Would I want to know all of those lines off by heart? Probably not.
Probably not. Not those page-long sentences. I think you touched on a really good point there that's been big key thing for me, especially like the fact that a whole heap of us in different forms of isolation, because the majority of the cast are in Victoria and a few of them are in Melbourne. Being in isolation is quite something. And digital stuff like this, it's like a synthetic version of the real thing. Being with someone in person is something else. Being on stage with someone else is such a beautiful human experience. And when we did this version of the Pride and Prejudice play, some of the most beautiful human moments that I've had on stage with a cast were part of that particular show. And to have had Alex direct us in that and to get to share those moments that she like orchestrated together, it was quite special. So to do it again, it'd have to be the exact same production, exact same cast, exact same director, because I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else.
Well, I think we were so lucky because it was so wonderful. And I mean, I think it's a testament to how amazing that production was that this whole idea was born of us wanting to do this, because we knew that there was an amazing team who worked so well, who connected so well. And, you know, obviously we've been very fortunate to bring on other very talented and amazing other performers, but we knew so many people to start with, and we knew how well we clicked, and we bonded so much through this production that we knew that it was something special, which is why we wanted to share it in the first place. So I agree with you. I don't think we would have undertaken this huge online project if it hadn't been the team that we had. And I wouldn't want to do it again with other people. I'd want it to be our team.
It's hard. And the funny thing is, I feel just as bonded to the people in this particular production as I did to the people that were on stage. And I think that's testament to this story's ability to bring people together, which is the whole reason why the cast wanted to share it with other people, is because that connection we had from it made us feel connected in this time of isolation. Technical challenges. I have no idea how to sound edit. I kind of know a little bit now, but I really, to have gone at the start of this, oh, it's all right, I'll do it. Yeah, that's a cool thing to learn. And
which it is.
I had no idea what I was opening myself up for. We alleviated a heap of the problems by adding a significant amount more RAM to my computer, even though my computer was well above the specifications required by the program. I still have massive issues. Like, I can't remember, what was it? Was it the proposal episode? I don't know. I clocked 50 crashes just on that.
I'm pretty sure that was the Netherfield Ball episode. I'm pretty sure
that was over 100.
Oh, there you go. I think it's improved by the proposal. Oh my God.
Which is all the episodes have a title, and it's like episode 1 mixdown, episode 2 mixdown, episode 3 mixdown. You get to Netherfield Ball and it's like, I swear word this episode. .mp3.
Just not to detract from what you're saying, but also we have another question from Shannon. But also Shannon, who plays our Mr. Collins, it's his birthday today. So I just wanted to quickly say, Shannon, thank you for coming. Now go away and enjoy your birthday. You're welcome to stay and listen to our response to your question, but happy birthday.
So technical challenges have been massive. Everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong. Everything. There have been times when Google Drive has completely refused to let me download things, so I've had to drive to another city, to the production manager's house, to get the files on a USB stick. It's just monstrous. Everyone is recording on different devices. We'll get there. It's no, you stop, Shannon, really. We'll go to Shannon's question now. Thanks for the question, Natasha. What was your personal preference from the book? Can we already listen to them in a podcast, or are they something to look forward to? Liv?
Very good question. Thank you, Shannon. It's tricky for me to pick just one, because I'm very lucky, not only as the narrator, but as Lizzie, because Lizzie's in the whole story. And what you find with a number of other characters is they sort of come in for moments in time, whether it's towards the start and towards the end, whether they pop up sporadically, whether it's like, one particular part of the story that they're in. For example, Colonel Fitzwilliam, he's only in a couple of chapters. So the nature of the other characters sort of does limit that. it's really hard to pick just one. I'm blessed to be in so many different moments, and there's so many different events that take place or relationships that you get to explore that I do just love. Like, I love all of those different components. So I love any scene or that involves Mrs. Bennet, because Liz Hardiman is not only a gem, but she has phenomenal comedic timing, and is so beautifully balanced with Chris Hiscock, who plays our Mr. Bennet, with his, essentially playing the straight man to her hysteria. I love that. I love the dynamic that those two had on stage and have in this adaptation that you can see as well. So I love all of those moments. There's a few quite intense moments that are, of course, really iconic, like whether it's, the proposal or the revelation, spoiler alert, that Lydia goes off and runs away with Wickham. That is such a intensely dramatic moment for Lizzie, because in essence, not only is her sister gone, but their family is ruined, like their reputation is ruined, so all of their prospects are ruined. And so, she feels that so deeply for herself, but also for her sisters, because at the time, reputation was such a big thing. Even if you didn't have heaps of money, if you had a reputation, then that might, count for itself. So there's those beautiful moments, some that we have heard, some that we haven't. But there's also other moments that I really loved, whether it's like discussions between the sisters and the relationship that Lizzie and Jane have, where there's the banter as well as the softness, or there's the moments where, Lizzie's at Netherfield, and I guess you get to see early on, and what you don't often see in other adaptations is the relationship that Bingley and Darcy have, and that playfulness where Darcy lets his guard down, whereas in most adaptations, you only see the very stoic side of Darcy, whereas in those moments you can see that, he's a bit more human around people he knows and loves and trusts. So honestly, I don't think I can pick a single moment. There's too many that I feel so attached to, whether it's because I've, performed them or I've heard other people perform, and I don't think I can just pick one. Sorry.
I'm all teary because hearing you say that, just so you guys know, Liv and I are quite close friends, and I haven't seen her since before lockdown, lockdown 1.0. So this entire project we have done apart, and I played Jane, which when I was first cast as Jane, I was really confused. Like I was like, okay, interesting choice. I don't see myself as a Jane, but then I think the reason Alex did it is because of the sister bond, and that's been re-emphasized as we've been doing this particular adaptation, because there's a couple of moments where I'd message Liv and I was like, I'm really proud of my acting here, and she'd be like, oh, like it's amazing. I was like, yeah, all I had to do was pretend I was talking to you, and
which I guess in a sense you are, but.
Yeah, and I know there was a time you said that to me, which made me cry a little bit. But yeah, I was just getting teary because hearing you be like, I can't choose. It's just classic you. For me, there are some really wonderful standout moments, like when Darcy and Bingley have that banter at the start, which is played by Paul and Ryan. The banter they had was wonderful, and the offers they gave one another to be like the wounded friend of like, you would excuse me, but you can't
very dare.
And then, oh, really? Because I know what you're like on a Sunday afternoon, mate. Like the banter between them was fabulous. So to be able to capture that was great. My personal favorite, it's hard because, we haven't finished yet, but to have worked with Ryan and Olivia for the proposal scene, I don't know how I'm ever going to top that. That was just
it's pretty iconic to begin with. Like, it's pretty iconic.
Yeah. So for me, the reason why that one is my favorite, and why, like, every time there's a film or a TV adaptation, whatever, so you got BBC, we've got the Joe Wright film, like, it's an abbreviated version of that scene. We've done the whole thing, and it's like 16 minutes of just awesomeness.
And to be fair too, what's really important in that bit, sorry, forgive me for interrupting, but that's one of the things that we adapted. Like that is one of the things that we created because like a big chunk of the Darcy's proposal, like before they essentially get into the argument, but a big chunk of Darcy's proposal is basically the narrator saying, and then Mr. Darcy went on to say this and he listed this. And we thought, what, that's ridiculous. Darcy's got to say that. It's not enough for the narrator to do that. Darcy's got to say that. Yeah.
So Liv did a first draft, and then I went and I took her stuff and I did another draft, and then she went back through my stuff and rejigged it, and then I went back through and tweaked a couple of things, and then she went back through again. That is how much we agonized over it to bring in that start. But then I think it was worth it because I feel like we did set the right tone. I feel like we really honored what Austen describes it. And to be quite clear, we didn't take anything out. We put in his words, and then Austen describes what he said. So you can hear the comparison of his opening words to what she describes those words to be. And then working with Olivia and Ryan to bring the different there's hardness, there's softness in that moment at the end when she says, prevailed upon to marry. And there's just that silence. And then he speaks so softly. Oh, shoot that directly into my veins.
Well, the dichotomy between those feels and those it was
which is not where we started, but it was where I was envisioning it. I was really glad that Ryan and Olivia came on that journey with me and gave me a whole heap of offers to work into that peak trough, because otherwise it's quite intense to listen to with lots of stuff.
I mean, well, it still is pretty intense to listen to. Right.
But in a much more wholesome, fulfilling, heartbreaking way.
And there's just so many shades. Yeah.
Yeah, there are. And I just want to do a quick shout out to one of my besties is here. Hey, Tess. Awesome to see you. I feel like this was meant to go, I was like an hour, but we're taking our time. We could digress. We could talk about this forever. Sorry, everyone. Let's go to the second.
It's on track. If you have another question, put it in the comments, please, because we will digress. We will talk about other things.
Okay, so we sort of touched on this. The podcast has been so great to listen to. If you had a chance to adapt any book like you have done with Pride and Prejudice, what would you pick? Now, we've discussed some stuff because we've touched on the start of that. Let's talk no copyright required.
The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, hands down. But that's only because it's my favorite book.
Just divine.
If you're a fantasy fan and you haven't read it, The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Never in my life, and I'm a prolific reader, have I ever been able to say I have a favorite book, because as you can tell, I tend to go, I love all of these. There's a lot of books that I love that are beautiful. This is my favorite book. And, the idea of reading some of those lines or, acting in some of those parts, divine.
There's a tweet that went around that was like, I don't care what's happening in your fantasy story, like whatever. All I want to know is what is the name of the sword and who has it? And that is the opening of The Name of the Wind, which is amazing. It's you guys, if you have not read Patrick Rothfuss's The Name of the Wind, you have to. So Olivia loaned it to me. And it was like instrumental in making me ghost every social media platform for a solid week because I just could not put the book down. Every time I had a moment where I was like, where you like absentmindedly pick up your phone, I would just be like, I have a moment. I'll read another little bit of this amazing book. He's one of my favorite authors. I put him up there with Robin Hobb, who's divine as well. And up there with like Barbara Hambly and a few of the other greats. So anyway, shall we jump to the next one?
Yes, sure. Otherwise we'll keep talking about that. It's a beautiful book, The Name of the Wind. Do it.
We could just talk about that for hours as well. How do you make the roles different so people can tell when the narrator is speaking as compared to when Lizzie is speaking? Olivia.
This is oh boy, this is something that I have learned progressively, and it's actually taken a while to feel comfortable and confident doing this. So very much at the start of this project, as Liana will well and truly know, I had to record my narrator files and my narration chapters separately from my Lizzie dialogue. I usually do it on separate days because it's a very different headspace, as well as different kinds of intonation and intent and all of that. And I really, one thing that was really important to me was that the audience would hear when it was narration and when it was dialogue, and I didn't want that to be obvious so much as another character speaking and then Lizzie. I wanted it to be obvious just by listening and that they'd recognize. And it's a tricky thing too, because in our stage adaptation that we did by John Jory, a number of the characters sort of break the fourth wall and narrate to the audience. Lizzie does most of it, but other characters do it as well. So I guess it's sort of built into that production. Whereas this one, we're sort of breaking new ground and figuring it out as we go along, and it's hard. Like, it's not an easy thing to do because very much in my head they're separate people. So I guess the easiest way of doing it, and something that I'm better at doing now, and I can sort of flip between the two much more easily, is the narrator is essentially more reserved and more guarded and more impartial. Not perfectly. There are these beautiful little moments where there's additional emphasis or additional, even sometimes it's to do with pacing, so things are sometimes drawn out a little bit more. But as a general rule, the narrator is more impartial, whereas Lizzie's lively. Like, I think it's funny in particularly in, like, as much as I actually quite like, I don't know whether this is sacrilegious, the 2005 Keira Knightley version of Pride and Prejudice, the film. Obviously, the film is significantly shorter than the BBC adaptation and the book itself. So there are things that aren't necessarily included. And I don't think in other adaptations of Lizzie, or whether it's even in Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, you don't always see that playfulness that she has. And you don't always see the depth of her relationships with various characters. You only see certain little snippets and segments. So what I love about bringing to Lizzie is that liveliness and that playfulness and that, like, clever playfulness and teasing quality that she tends to have, so that you can tell when she truly loves someone, or when she's really not liking someone or whatever. I think there's I guess a more raw quality to her emotions, whereas the narrator is very pulled back for me. So yeah, it's not an easy thing to switch between, but I think I'm better at it. But then again, I suppose, Liana, given that you listen to all of my audio files, you would be able to say whether I've gotten better at it.
It impresses me hearing you flip between the two. Like, when we were doing the episode How Despicably Have I Acted, and I was listening to Olivia's takes, she just pauses a moment, drops into Lizzie, and then out comes the How Despicably Have I Acted, and then off she goes back to narrator. So it's I think you're pretty amazing at it, to be quite frank.
Well, to be fair, I guess I've had a fair bit of practice, but it's definitely something that I've had to learn and work at. Like, it hasn't come easily because I think sometimes when you're so in the moment of one role, it's very hard to pull yourself out of that and then put yourself into something else. So it has gotten easier, and I feel like I'm at a place where I can now kind of switch between the two. But as you know, it's not instant. I just sort of need a beat or a moment to find that and go on with it. So it has been challenging, but I think that's been a really great skill to also be able to learn too. So
yeah. All right, we've got another question. How difficult or easy is it to maintain the voice of the character for the length of the recording?
Is that for me or is that for you?
That's for you.
Oh, okay. Well, for me, I'm very fortunate. I find it really easy. Once I'm in it, I'm in it. And I'm very fortunate that not only have I done a number of productions that require a British accent, but also, when we're not in a global pandemic, I work at a medieval castle just outside of Ballarat on the weekends. So I guess as far as the accent goes, I'm used to putting on that accent. And I think, not only am I very fortunate to have done the production before and taken on this role before, But, I'm a big nerd. I've read the book before many times and I've seen the adaptations, and finding Lizzie now, it's not effortless, but I feel like I know Lizzie. So I don't find once I'm in, that's easy. It's not something that your immersion breaks so much. So I personally find once I'm in that and I'm doing a recording session, I'm really focused and I stay in. How do you find that for Jane?
I was actually going to comment on you doing it with Lizzie from me hearing your recordings.
Okay.
Which was going to be like, it's been amazing because she'll give me a heap of offers and then I'll come back and be like, the other actor has given me this. Can you give me like X, Y, and Z? So we get like, she has spent a lot of time exploring very fine, detailed, complex, multifaceted sides of the character. So I think it gets even easier with that. With Jane, I really struggle. But I think, like I was talking to this about you yesterday, the sacrifice of me being director is that Jane has suffered as a result, and it's my biggest regret. But I don't necessarily think that means that it's bad. But for me, looking back, it's different as director because I have every character's motivations, wants, needs, the scenes, the factors that are weighing on them in my head. When I was Jane on stage, I was just Jane, and that was all I had to think about. And me as caring about the other characters, whereas it's very different being the director as well. I don't know how people like Kenneth Branagh do it. It's next level talent. It's but
it's a lot of brain space, isn't it?
Yeah, Jane is a very challenging character for me. So for me to immerse myself completely, I really need to, as opposed to adding Jane as an afterthought, give her the time and space she deserves, which we have more time to do now, especially we're more set up. So I get to rely on Liv a bit more, and she's going to be beginning to direct me, which is cool. So, yeah, anyway, I feel like we've gone on this one for a while. We've got another one here.
Probably a little while.
Do we have we've got a banner question. Olivia, since you have 2 roles, is there any difference to how you prepared for them?
I think so, in a sense that, I mean, and this all, I guess, goes to a little bit of like being in them and finding those different characters and maintaining them. Approaching Lizzie again as a voice actor and not as a stage performer, because I'm very fortunate to have taken on the role previously in our 2018 production with BNT. Some of it was not muscle memory, but I had taken on the character before, which was beautiful. But it's a very new and different experience, and a whole different skill set that I've had to develop, because, as we've discussed, you can't rely on energy from an audience or energy from other actors or a set or a prop or a costume. So much of it is. It's I think it's the shades of the emotion and what you're able to express. So some of that I was able to draw on my original experience, which was beautiful, because I loved that production. I loved that team. I loved that season of that show, and that will always have a very special place in my heart. But I did also have to take on Lizzie differently, because this is far more in depth and in more detail than I've ever had the opportunity to explore and show of her before. So that was different in and of itself. The narrator, I almost have come at it. So in the rest of my life, I'm a teacher. I teach history and English. So I guess I've almost approached the narrator almost in a teaching capacity, or in a explanatory. And I feel like there's an element of that that is definitely part of the preparation for the narrator, and even the delivery too, because I mean, my goodness, so much of it is around pronunciation of words, or the syntax of sentences, because let me tell you, Jane Austen, the style of Regency writing doesn't always fit in a way that would make clear sense to a modern audience. So sometimes even some of the changes
Regency audience.
Yeah, my goodness. Some of those some of the things that we have adapted has sometimes I've gone, that sentence doesn't actually make sense. I'm going to flip those 2 words, or I'm going to rephrase the end of that sentence because
really
there's a difference between, well, there's a difference, I think, between keeping to the integrity of the original text and, you know, sometimes your audience no longer being immersed or being distracted by the fact they've gone, what? So, and you don't want that. You want them to just be in the flow and following along. So, yeah, it's very different preparation because they are 2 different characters. The narrator is more impartial and more sort of omniscient, whereas Lizzie's more fire. She is, you know. So yeah, very different approaches to them, I would say.
Because I've got the power, I can, like, I just kind of went, I could just avoid the questions that are for me. But
it's your turn. I've already talked heaps.
Liana, since I understand this is your first time directing, what have you learned about directing that you did not know before? All of it. This is actually a really hard question because there's so much to directing, and there's like little parts of it. The smallest portion of it is directing the actors. There's a whole heap to do with getting the vision to happen. I was really lucky coming into this that I have been a manager of staff, of various numbers of staff for quite a while, and have done lots of professional development on that front, which stood me in amazing stead. Like, to come in with, you know, communication skills already established and knowing how to lead was a really big thing. To jump into that without having managed people, I think would have been quite a big shock to the system for me. Yeah, it's hard to, and I now sound like Liv, it's hard to pick one thing because it's literally all of everything I did not know before, which makes it hard because the director in me now at episode, whatever I'm editing at the moment, I think it's 18. I'm not sure. They're all blurred into one. The director in me now would want to say to the director in me back then so many different things. And there, like Olivia and I were talking about this yesterday, there are so many things that I wanted to do but didn't have the capacity because I was still learning at the time, and it was a lot.
And I think from my perspective too, it's not like you've just been directing, like you have been, you know, doing social media stuff. Like I guess there's so many different facets, and this is also true for both of us. Like, I'm not just Lizzie and narrator, like you know, whether it's writing or, you know, whatever, like there's a
adaptation,
there's a whole scope of different roles that we've taken on, and we've done that at various points, but it's not like we've been able to dedicate ourselves to learning one new area. In many cases we've had to learn a whole range of new areas or help out doing a thing or whatever. So, you know, we've learned a lot, but I think it's really important to acknowledge just how much work we've poured into this in so many different roles.
Work and blood.
And tears, let's be real.
No, it's been a lot. I think it's worth acknowledging the cost of it because the price has sometimes been very high. And but every day you're like, is it worth it? Yes. Yes, it's such a gift to be able to do this, and it feels it's still a privilege to be the people at the front, lifting, doing the heavy lifting, to make it happen. And from that, it means that we can pass on the things that we learned to other people. So, yeah. What has been the hardest part of directing, and what has been the easiest part? The easiest part has been the actual directing of the actors, because actors come to you like they're complete, whole, complex human beings with these vast experiences, and you don't need to tamper with any of that. Like they come into it knowing what it feels like to be a human being that responds to something that hurt them, that made them laugh, And sometimes
sorry, I just read a comment and I think it's worthwhile flagging it with you.
Adobe Audition is the real antagonist.
I could write an essay on that.
Thanks, Zev. Yes, it is, babe.
Sorry.
Right. Yeah, back to this one.
Sorry, the easiest.
So the easiest thing has been working with actors. So like, I mean, I kind of have a cheat sheet because I know Liv really well, and was excellently cast. Now I inherited Liv as the cast for Lizzie Bennet.
You were stuck with me
as this. That being said, when we're doing auditions, and she was like, "This person's really good," and I was like, "I'm not recasting you," and she was like,
"So anxious,
please don't." It was adorable.
Oh, it was a glass case of emotion.
But yeah, the easiest part has been just showing up with the actors and seeing what they show up with, and then helping connect the dots for them so that they can connect with whatever it is in them that helps them connect. I said connect way too many times with the character. So it's literally you're a joining of dots, and then that's what a director does. You literally just go, "Oh, have you tried that way? What about over there? What about that?" And then people go there. Okay, cool. It's bliss. It's amazing watching people find their way, and and you're holding a little lantern up, being, "Have you tried over here?" And they come up with some amazing stuff. The hardest part is the power imbalance between myself and Olivia, by far, easily outstripping everything else. Because we came into this as co-collaborators, and she means a lot to me. Her respect means a lot to me, and the relationship I have with her means a lot to me. So we talked it out before we first started, didn't we? With, well, what do we do if we do disagree? What do we do if we're at loggerheads? And let's be honest, this is in the middle of a pandemic when people feel isolated and alone, and you don't have clear, easy methods of communication. Everybody has to be on their A game, talking to one another, being like, what do you need? Because otherwise you're stuck on your own in your own head, and you might not know what's going on. So every production has those challenges, except that in a regular world production, we don't have the outside pressure of a pandemic. But people still do have differences of opinion, and you do need to work through those. It's just, I think, significantly more challenging in the context that we're in, because there's a global pandemic. We can't just meet up and have a chat. There are other things that are causing us stress or worry, and so you don't. In the real world, people don't always bring their A game, but it's even harder to bring your A game every single time in this context. It's hard. It's heavy. Yeah, especially when a pandemic, any traumatic environment that you have will always aggravate your more aggressive and passive communication styles. So whether that trauma is a pandemic, it is grief, it is a traumatic incident that you've been through. So you have to very consciously choose to communicate clearly, assertively, collaboratively, with a goal of achieving something that works with a group. Anyway, I'm digressing. So Liv and I talked about at the start, what do we do if we get to that point that we have a disagreement or something needs to get done? And then we had, forgive me, Liv, a really difficult opening. One of Liv's best friends passed away. And I had to start making a few more choices perhaps without Liv, which was hard navigating that, when usually I would have extensively collaborated with her, and she didn't quite have the capacity. So to navigate that, and something that has stood me in the stead of that ever since, is when I go to bed at night, and I've been making decisions for the Pride and Prejudice podcast, I literally ask myself, would this make Liv proud of me? Would this make her proud of the decisions that I've made? Would it make me feel like I am giving her the best version of this text that she adores possible? And that is the only way that I can navigate it, knowing that I've behaved in the best way, with the most integrity, with all the power that I have, because I have all the power. Which it might seem like a really odd thing, but it's so important, especially when we're adapting the text and stuff like that. Always trying to find new ways to collaborate, always trying to find ways to make sure that I come back and say to Liv, was that the best choice? Are you happy with what I did? So it's a difficult one. But yeah, that's the thing I found the hardest. And there are times when I will like lay awake and go back over my stuff, being like second guessing myself. But we've got a really good partnership. So I would go back to her and be like, your thoughts. And the only time we have actually disagreed, like proper disagreed, and both actually been like, oh no, I believe in my thoughts on this here, is with some dialogue that hasn't yet happened. So Liv and I,
not been in the episode yet. No.
Yeah. So Liv gave some options of it. I went back and gave like a rework of it, and Liv was like, oh yeah, that's cool, except these lines at the start. And then I went, yeah.
It's essentially over 2 lines, really. Like, it's interesting. Yeah, you're right. Because largely, I think we've been very fortunate in many ways that even though, we haven't always brought our A game, because who can consistently do that every single time? No one is perfect. We've done pretty darn well. Like, I think we've mostly communicated really effectively. A lot of the time our visions of the project have aligned, and all of those things, because it's it's a multifaceted vision. There's so many different components to it. And yeah, I think we've been actually quite fortunate that that's sort of been the only real point where we've both gone, we both actually have it. It's not even a massively different perspective, is it? Like, it's interesting that it's not, it's not polar opposite, but it has been, the point where both of us have gone, how do we negotiate this? And given that, like, we're still working through that, which is, it's also really good that it hasn't been a closed off thing. Like, it's still a collaboration and it's still a discussion, which is, I think, probably why we have been so successful, because you have to listen to each other. Otherwise this, these things, like partnerships like this, projects like this, they couldn't feasibly work if you weren't willing to listen or to give. So, there have been other times where we haven't been, identical, but we've been able to negotiate these. But this is sort of the only one where it's been, we both feel really strongly about this.
Which is fine. Like, but going back to what I was saying as director, like, then I went away and went, okay, I have all the power and I really want this. So I could literally just say to Liv, sorry. And that's all I would have to say. And because she's a respectful partner in this collaboration, she would respect that, but I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. So I went away and thought about it, and I was one of the things that Liv suggested, which I really loved, which was to get the actor to record the line with both options, which they've now done. So at the end of the day, I won't care whether or not it's my lines now or Liv's lines, like that adjustment. What I'll care about is, as a director, what it sounds like when it all comes together. And I'll probably send Liv a couple of options to look at that. But anyway, we've digressed again. It's like, this is going to go longer than an hour. Sorry, everybody, but, it'll be recorded. You can tune in later. That's another one for me. So I just want to jump to one of you, because I feel like I've been talking a little bit too much. Here you go. What was your favorite thing to act?
I don't even know that we've actually gotten to it yet. I know that's probably a bigger question, but so far, what have been my favorite scenes to act? Any opportunity where Lizzie can be witty and a tiny bit snarky but well intentioned, I love because, as I said, that's one of the things that a lot of other adaptations miss. Like, of course, she's clever and she loves her family and she hates Darcy or whatever. There's all of those things you get to experience, but there's more to it than sometimes what adaptations can show. So she's playful and she's funny and she's not willing to take anything lying down. So some of the moments that I have loved, let me think, I have any opportunity I think that I get to say, yes, Mama, or something to Mrs. Bennet. I love Lizzie sort of either playing the straight man to Mrs. Bennet her nerves, or saying something a little bit, jesting in response. I do love those moments. What I really liked actually too, and this is an interesting difference from our 2018 production, is we have swapped one of the actors playing one of the roles. So in our 2018 production, some of our performers took on more than one role. Obviously, that was out of convenience, follow the script, but also because some of the parts are relatively minor by comparison, so there's opportunity for actors to take on different roles. Ebony McLean, who currently plays Charlotte Lucas, was originally our Miss Bingley. So anyway, we'd asked her to take on this different role, and ironically, Charlotte Lucas was actually the role that Ebony had originally auditioned for. So she then, it's almost full circle, strangely. What I've really loved the opportunity to do is to see Charlotte and Lizzie's friendship. Because that's often something that, is a little bit neglected, I think, in other adaptations. Like, I think it's always obvious that Lizzie and Jane, like, they're probably the most important people in each other's worlds. And I think that's always present, and that's such a beautiful thing to be able to do. And, you can always tell that Lizzie absolutely adores her father and he adores her. Like, I think there are those ones, even if it's not heaps of time spent on it, the moments where you see those relationships and those connections, it is very evident and very obvious how each party feels about the other. But I think sometimes her friendship with Charlotte isn't really dwelt on very much, and there's not as much opportunity to see and explore that. So I think that's one of the opportunities that I've loved in this adaptation, is to work with Ebony and to hear the playfulness and the friendship between Charlotte and Lizzie, but also the differences between them, because Charlotte is much more practical and pragmatic, whereas Lizzie is swayed by her emotions. So I think that's been really lovely to see. It's been a wonderful experience working with Ange Kwai as Mrs. Gardner. Because unfortunately our original Mrs. Gardner from our adaptation wasn't able to return, and Lizzie and Mrs. Gardner have such another beautiful relationship that is lovely to explore. So it's been lovely to connect and work with Ange in that way, because it's almost like, even though there's not huge age difference between her and Mrs. Gardner, Mrs. Gardner is almost a more motherly figure sometimes than Mrs. Bennet is, because Mrs. Bennet, Lizzie is not Mrs. Bennet's favourite, so she doesn't spend as much time. So that's another relationship that I have adored exploring. But some of the scenes that have also been my favourite to act, some of them are quieter, some of them are just those brief little moments of saying I've missed you to a particular character, or some of them have been, the fiery ones, like the reaction to the proposal, and those moments there that are quite intense. So yeah, I know that I've done my typical, I love all of them, but those are some of the key things that I have loved acting. And the one that I'm probably most looking forward to acting has not yet happened, so you're going to have to wait and see for that one.
My favorite scene that you've acted was I actually think it was the proposal of Mr. Collins, because the diversity of what came out of your offerings there blew my mind. It was great.
Well, yeah, and it's funny, you wouldn't have, I guess, assumed that there was so many layers to that, because Lizzie essentially goes, mm-mm. That's basically her response of like, mm-mm, nope. Mm-mm. But you're right, like there was a lot that came out of that, so that was also fun. That was also fun.
Yeah. This one's a quick one that we can answer very, very quickly, because we've sort of answered before. Do you want to say that?
We have changed it.
Is the podcast word for word from the book? If it is not, how do we decide what sentence parts to include and not include?
We're very fortunate in that I would say comfortably 99.5% of the original story we have included. We haven't really excluded anything. The only thing that we have done is we've either converted narration to character dialogue, which means that, and in most of those instances, we're already using Austen's words, because Austen will say, and then he went on to detail this, or he then listed this, or he expressed to Elizabeth this. So much of the dialogue that we've created is born out of Austen's words. We use her phrasing, we use her choice of words and her description and all of that. The only thing I would say that we have done differently is we have added stuff. We've given scope. So one of the lovely examples that I'd love to give of that, of changing something, is we've given Mrs. Hurst far more lines. So one of Mr. Bingley's sisters, who is married, so she's not Miss Bingley anymore, she's Mrs. Hurst, played by our delightful Liana. A lot of Mrs. Hurst's lines that you hear in the podcast are actually Miss Bingley's, that we've just stolen from Miss Bingley. And I also think not only is it wonderful to give Mrs. Hurst that opportunity and that voice, and Lana that opportunity, but the exchanges between Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst are so much more enhanced, I think, because it's not just a sort of one-sided Miss Bingley sniping at one thing. It's these two women together who are united and have, oh, yes, well, I agree. Oh, well, of course. They build off each other, I think. And I think that's a lovely change that we've been able to incorporate. Because, yeah, it's given actors scope beyond just giving an actor lines. It's meant that they can play off each other, and I think that's brought to life beautifully by Marley and Lana, because they have very different sounding voices. And I think that even went with the casting, yeah.
Why it was, because we had an exceptional. There were like maybe 8 people that we had there to choose between, and we ended up choosing them as a pair. Who had the best pairing of voices, which was wonderful. Yeah.
Yes. So that was nice to think that.
Yeah. We've got some other questions here. Ooh. I'm just conscious of time. If you had a time machine, speaking of, and could go back and give yourself advice before you started on this project, what would you tell yourself, Olivia?
I would tell myself to take a breath. I think, and we've talked about this so much, my goodness, is that the project has sort of taken on a life of itself. It's bigger than we anticipated, which is wonderful for so many different reasons. But in some ways, because it happened and it sort of, it built and built, and it was kind of like a snowball rolling down a hill, getting bigger as it went. I would have what I would have liked to have done is taken a bit of a breath, given us an opportunity to pace ourselves, because I think there have been times where we've had to work really, really hard, or we've almost pushed ourselves, and in wonderful ways, but we have pushed ourselves. Like, it has been hard work. And even though it sounds amazing, I think, and it's been obviously very well received, we've worked really hard. And there have, of course, been weeks or periods of time where it has been less intense, where we've almost caught up and we're able to take that gasp. But I would tell us to take a bit of a breath, and I would say that you are going to adapt the script, so try and get that done before you cast everyone and actually start this process, because I think, as wonderful as the adaptation process has been, I think that's been another thing on our plates that we've had to be conscious of and aware of. And I guess the technical sides of the production, which, my God, we've been so very fortunate with our production manager, Elizabeth Bradford, and then we've taken on Marley Vanderbilt, who as a production assistant, because we've realised how enormous this project is and the scope that it is, and wanting to conduct ourselves in a professional and organised manner, we needed more help. We couldn't humanly do it, as well as having day jobs and occasional headspace where you're not invested in either work or this project. So we've been very, very lucky to take on those people and have their help and support and their guidance as well. So I think I'd tell us to take a bit of a breath and to go pace yourself at the start, because this is a very long and beautiful production, but it's a lot. So breathe.
That's exactly my advice. My words for myself would be, you have so much time. Because at the start, I had this overwhelming feeling that we didn't have time. And now when I look back, but that being said, like you don't know what you don't know. And I'm hoping that feeling of you've got time stays with me for everything that I do going forward. Yeah. Do you ever feel intimidated working with such well-known material?
Like, I can't even articulate. Oh my God. I mean, speaking for myself, I'm incredibly fortunate to be able to take on this role, because this is one of my dream roles. Lizzie Bennet is iconic. So before having done this production or our other production, I love Pride and Prejudice. I loved Austen's work. I love Lizzie. I love so much about her. People are really attached to this story and these characters. Like, I mean, I guess we're very fortunate in that that's part of the reason why our original production in 2018 was a sellout, and also why this one has proved to be so popular, other than the fact that I think both of them were done well, is that people are attached to this story and these characters, and they know them. And when you say Darcy, you know, people will picture Colin Firth, or they'll picture Matthew, you know, whatever adaptation that they're attached to. When you say those names, when you talk about these characters, people are invested already, and they haven't even listened to your podcast. So, oh my God, it's overwhelmingly intimidating. You want to do them justice, and you want to, you know, bring their voice to the recording. So absolutely, I'm intimidated. I still am, even though I feel like I know Lizzie and I get her. Oh my God. Recording the proposal scene, recording the Lizzie's reaction to the proposal scene, you can't stuff that up. Like, you know, like there's a lot of pressure. Absolutely. Like, I love it, but yep. Am I intimidated? Mm-hmm. Am I still? Kind of.
The moment that I really went far out, this was audacious, was right before we did, right before I started piecing together the proposal scene, or doing the rehearsals for the proposal scene. I was well aware that we had started what was meant to be something small and amateur, and each week we learned something new, and it started sounding better and better. And then next minute we have, like, what are we at, 13,000 downloads, and we've got fans all over the world and people buying our merchandise. And it was just like so big. And then we hit the proposal, and I was there like we're here. I have to, like, it, not that you would run away, because I don't have a cowardly bone in my body, but it was a we are reaping what we have sown moment.
Well, and which is wonderful. But yeah, to maintain and build on what we've done, there is sort of that expectation, because particularly for an iconic scene like that, and, you know, essentially that's the middle point of the book. That's only half of the story. You lose people at that iconic moment, they're gone. Like, they're not coming back. So yeah, it is intimidating.
Yeah. So I felt that a lot. That there was a lot of responsibility there and care taken. And I could talk about that particular episode for hours. But I ended up going at it with a focus that Olivia and I know this material. I know and adore this material. And if I, at the end of this, am proud of what I have created, and I look at it and think, yeah, I adore that, me personally. I can tell when I like an episode, because I normally don't listen to episodes outside of editing them. And then sometimes I go back and go, oh, that was a good one. And I listen to it actually on Spotify. This one I've listened to probably 24 times, 25 times, because it's, and each time I'm like listening for the exact microscopic moments that I put into it. But before approaching that, yeah, massively intimidated. And then just decided to go in it and make it something that I would enjoy as a fan of the story. So, yeah. And this actually leads into the next question. So far out of what you've recorded, what has been your favorite part to direct? Like every episode has something in it that is just brilliant.
I'm just putting my phone on the charger. Please keep talking.
Okay. I'm like, is you letting Yuki out? What's happening? The proposal scene, that was 4 or 5 rehearsals that we went through with re-records and stuff like that to get us to where we were. And directing that was exquisite, and having such talented, amazing actors to work with, so that when I was in the moment with them, it just was bliss. It was so good. I tell you something, going back to this question here, what has been the hardest part to doing? What has been the easiest part? Hang on, no. what was something that you learned about directing that you did not know before? So something I've learned about directing audio is significantly more like television than stage. And the reason for that is the only thing that you have to go on is a person's voice. And so when you're doing your thing, it's the moment to moment is microscopic. It's not the big view and like that you would get on stage where you're looking at things from a distance, but you're much closer up and you're hearing every little slight change. So that has been quite an important thing. Okay, I'm trying to power through the last questions. How do you do the accents, Olivia?
The way I learn accents, and not just British RP, which is received pronunciation, or what people would sort of call neutral standard, whatever. I mimic things. So I like watching British film and TV. And so honestly, it's a bit of mimicking, but it's just also practice. And I'm also very fortunate in my method of learning accents, because I feel like I can just drop into a British accent now. I don't really have to think about it anymore. Is the easiest way is to talk to people, because you will hear in your own accent as well as in what they're saying. You will pick up when they're on it and when you've made a mistake. So it's literally that kind of trial and error. You might not necessarily know the correct sound, but you can hear it when you go, that's not right. That's I've fallen out of the accent on that word or in that sentence or whatever it is. So I've found mimicking, watching British TV shows and TV, and doing a bit of research if you don't know how to pronounce a word, looking it up and hearing it in the British accent, but not operating off a script. If you just operate off a script, you will only know how to say those words in the accent, so that you're sort of limited for the next time you encounter the accent. So having those conversations with other people and just generally talking about your day or talking about the characters or whatever it is you're talking about, doing that in an accent and holding that, because then you'll hear when you make mistakes, so you know what you need to learn next. That's how human beings learn. They make mistakes and then they try it again. So that's, for me, I just say practice, and if you can, talk to other people who are putting on that same accent.
Leading into that, Liv, do you have to do more than one recording sometimes to get the accent and pronunciation right?
I don't know. I feel like you could tell them the answer to that.
Liv with accent, not so much. Some of the actors that haven't had the road miles that Liv has had on her accent, they will give things a few goes, and you might hear, like in their first take, they're kind of feeling their way in and then they get in. The pronunciation we listen out for, and we flag it in the notes in every episode, and that actually leads into the next question here. What advice on word pronunciations are you given? I've got a friend who's an educator and a native RP speaker, and I will call her and be like, hey, Jackie, how do you pronounce contrivance in a British accent? And she'll play it out for me and like mull it around in her mouth and then give me quite a detailed technical response. Or I'll send her the word and be like, how do you pronounce that? And I've got a list of Austin words.
I know. There's so many. I guess the way I would answer this particular question is I narrate entire chapters. So when other characters have dialogue, I will say it. So every word in our script, I will give Liana in my narrator file. So it means that it's really cool because I can give Lizzie takes in the narration, but I will also give her the lines of the other actors. And this is originally we started that because it sort of would give her a place marker for how long episodes would go for, and how long it would take for other people and the windows of time that other actors would probably use to deliver their lines. But I actually think in hindsight now, sort of reflecting back, it's helped us a little bit with regard to pronunciation or how you would deliver things with a particular accent. So it's almost been a guide for the production team and for the other actors of how to pronounce particular words or how to say particular words with the accent. But I also make mistakes too, like especially when I'm 20 minutes into a narration and I'm going through, and look, sometimes you don't read what's on the page, you read what you want to be there. And I think there's a lot of instances of Austen's particular word choice and sentence structure that I will almost read and accidentally modify on the fly, and I'll read what I want the sentence to be, not what's actually there. And that is the cause of a number of my narrator re-records, or I'll glance at a word and assume what it is instead of actually saying the full word. So for me, I make mistakes in pronunciation, and I have to do my research and I have to look it up and fix it. So
yeah. I've just got a quick list here of the words, some of the hard to say words.
Are you going to tell them the file name that I called it, or is this your file?
No. This is just the list of words that everyone has at some point fumbled. Panegyric, precipitance, expostulation, approbation, alacrity, abominably, asperity, imperturbably, profligacy, obeisance, diminution. Diminution.
Is it, when you say obeisance, is that obeisance?
Obeisance, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I've got a file, so we store our files on Google Drive because that's the only place that there's large enough space, and also it's convenient because we can all access it. There is a file that I've created that's called Dumb Words That Liv Has Had to Say, and I've listed off all of the various words that I've encountered that I've gone, what? And sometimes in my recording, Liana will hear me get to midway through a sentence and then just go, I don't know, I'll do it later. and then carry on. So there are a couple of
someone else's dialogue, because that's going to get replaced. But
yeah,
when it's the narrator.
Yeah, sometimes when it's the narrator, I've got to do it.
Yeah. This is possibly the last question. What has been the hardest part of this process, the biggest learning curve? For me, that has been sound editing, which I have never done before. Olivia, what's yours?
My hardest thing is giving like the hardest learning curve is the lines being recorded in isolation, and giving you as a director the light and shade and varying degrees of emotion, because I don't know what the other actor is going to offer. So finding ways to approach lines, and I think the way I started it was I'll usually start by varying my pace. So I'll, do it quicker or shorter, or I'll do segments of it quicker or shorter. So it's pacing. Then it sort of comes down to particular emphasis on particular words. So trying the sentence or paragraph again and again, emphasizing particular points or moments within the dialogue, and then bringing to it a shade of what action or emotion am I trying to convey in this beat or this sentence or this phrase, like depending on the size of what I'm looking at, and giving different shades of that, because there's heaps of ways that you can, like, there's not one way that you would deliver anger. There is not one way that you would deliver sadness. There's not one way that you would deliver happiness or joking. There's so many different degrees of it. I think what my biggest learning curve at the start was showing all of that range, and giving different options so that they would mesh with other people, because you're not in the same room with the other people, you're by yourself. So yeah.
Well, one final question, which Seva's just popped in here: how much is enunciation versus accent? Can I talk to this,
please? I'll chip in at the end.
So the British accent is both critical that you articulate. It's part of the British accent. Australians, we tend to swallow our words.
We're lazy.
Yeah. So we, as culturally, we fade off at the end of sentences as though we're backing away from our ideas. The Brits don't do that. And emphasis is important. Clarity. They tend to not get angry. They will get articulate. So it's both of them at once, which is really important. And because it's audio, often when I go back to an actor, I will like, you've got time. Don't rush. Let your character have all the room. Like, take as long as you want to get drunk on your own words. Like, go to town. Because having accent is phase one, but the enunciation is, once they get that, and tell you who does that phenomenally well is Ali Krieg. She's our Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and the way she rolls to the end of those sentences. Oof.
To be fair, if there was ever a character that you needed to do that, it was her. But you're right. Yep, I would agree.
Yeah. So Zev's just said, so they use the mum voice to get angry. So when Brits get angry, it's like, you are an idiot. They have to be very particularly clear. So it's about precision over emotion. Go to town, Liv. What do you think?
Oh, I very much agree, and I think so. We've been very fortunate to do some accent workshops with some of our cast members, whether that's in one-on-one as a director, as sort of as part of the note session, because sometimes particular scenes require particular things from the actors, whether it's pronunciation, enunciation, accent, all of that. But we've also had the opportunity to do that in small groups, which has been fabulous, because one of the beautiful things that I didn't know we'd have the capacity to do with this podcast is share our knowledge and teach and show, and work with people and sort of upskill, I guess, so that they're coming away from it, not only hopefully a really positive experience, but with new skills. So one of the things that I've found in coaching, I guess, and providing a bit of guidance and support and teaching around accents is RP, received pronunciation. It's quite clipped. So I think you're right. Like, it's even when they're not angry, like even just in general use, a lot of the time received pronunciation is clipped and it is deliberate. It's not lazy. It's not drawly. It is precise. It is articulated very clearly and very deliberately. So I think the enunciation sort of also, it goes back to RP. Like, I think that's almost a characteristic of that accent in and of itself. It's hard to do RP and not be clipped. It's hard to do RP correctly and not be precise. So I think they're sort of married together. I think they feed each other. You have to have them meshed.
That is our last question. We're a little over time. Sorry, everybody. That's mostly an apology to my housemates who have been not using the kitchen because I'm in here doing this. So now I'm going to cook them food. Thank you, everybody. What else there's things selected. I don't want them selected. Please go away. Thank you all so much. We would love you to find Pride and Prejudice on your favorite, how am I signaling this? It's down there. Podcast platform. Please, Apple, Spotify, Google, soon, possibly Amazon. We don't know when that launches. Also,
it's actually just launched.
Oh,
it has. Like today, pretty much. As well as, I think, are we on iHeartRadio? I think we are as well. Or just going directly to Buzzsprout.
Yeah, if you jump to our Buzzsprout, there'll be some links in. If you enjoyed this session, you want another one like it, anything like that, feel free to hit us up on social media. If you are a fan of the podcast, please also, and you want, you can hit up the DMs of our Facebook and Instagram and tell us who your favorite actor is and your address, and you can get a postcard from your favorite actor, or I suppose me. If people just generally be like, I love all of it, I just go, okay, you can have one from me, the general local buffoon. Yeah, cool. Thanks, guys. It has been really fun. We have loved doing this, and we're going to keep it live so people can watch later on. Cheers. Have a good evening. Goodbye.